welcome to the Christerbelle Adventures. On this snowy March day, I'm feeling like spring, so I'm going to open up the Floral Hoop Wreath Kit. Inside are the instructions on how to make this wreath. There are also several bunches of flowers. These are peonies. They look like they just need to be fluffed. There are some miniature roses, some more white roses. I'm not sure exactly what this is called. The instructions say that there is eucalyptus. Mine didn't come with eucalyptus. There is floral wire. There is, in this bag, there's some floral tape. It says wire cutters. These are not wire cutters. These are like shears, like pruning shears. And there is this large gold hoop for making the wreath. It says that it is a 19-inch gold hoop. Let's get started. To start off, I read through all the instructions twice, and then I organized all of the faux flowers to decide how I wanted to make the wreath. I knew I wanted the peonies in the middle, and so I was trying to decide what order they were going to go. And then I compared them to the miniature roses so that I could spread out some of the pink. Then I went in and started using the shears to cut apart all of the faux flowers. There's definitely wire in those. I walked out of the room for maybe a full minute because I don't like using these, and I wanted to use, I realize these are needle nose, but I wanted to use this wire cutter portion. And now I have a friend. Ooh, feisty. You're gonna need to move, sir. Now that I've moved the cat off of my project, I can continue cutting apart the flowers. I started using my needle nose, the wire part of my needle nose, and it just wasn't working. So I went back to the shears and then went back to the needle nose, and I really did struggle with these white roses trying to get this end part. In hindsight, I would have just cut up further and I wouldn't have had to worry about any of this at all. Having never done a project like this before, it was a complete learning experience for me. Oh yeah, look at how it's like chewing up the blade. It doesn't pull apart. It's definitely easier when breaking apart the miniature roses to cut in a smaller portion than in the larger portion of the stem. I spent a lot of time organizing how the flowers would go, and I wouldn't do that as much because I did kind of wing it as I went along. On the gold hoop, there is a seam where it is all connected together. And some people would put this at the top. I didn't really want this part to show, so I actually put it at the bottom and put it in the center, or tried to put it in the center, so that all of the flowers were covering this seam. I like to clean up as I go, so every time I cut off a piece of the stem, I would pick it up and move it. I would absolutely do that again, but I would cut all of the flowers down first instead of doing it as I went along. I think that would have made the process slightly faster instead of picking up the pruning shears over and over again. The other thing that I struggled with a lot was somewhere I had read that you needed to keep all of the wire on the spool. This wasn't in the directions. Somewhere else that I read this. I wouldn't do that again. I went through half the project with moving the spool of wire around and around and around. And I wouldn't do that again. I also tried fluffing a bunch of the flowers as I went. And while that's helpful, you spend a lot of time at the end fluffing everything. I don't think it's a necessary step to fluff as you go. See, I'm still struggling. I would absolutely cut small sections of this wire instead of sending the entire spool around and around and around. I fiddled with the center part a little bit off camera, and then trying to add the next flower in, I found it really challenging. And then I had to cut off more of the stem because I realized I had too much. I also flipped the entire project over and started wrapping the wire around from the back, looking at the back instead of looking at the front. Then I could see where I was wrapping it around the stem. That was helpful. I had to take lots of breaks because the table I was working at was lower, about knee height, and I didn't really want to sit for this part. I would absolutely do this at a table that you can sit at or at a table that you can stand at, depending on how you like to craft. The other thing that I did, I tried working within the box. The miniature roses, the miniature pink roses, had another something on it with these little bitty bead things, and they kept falling off. So I like the fact that I was working within the box that it came in, because I was able to keep my project space clean. But if I was doing this again, I'd work at a taller table and I would not work within the box. Still struggling with the wire. I love crafts, and I'm trying to figure out what kind of crafts I like. I would do this project again, but I would absolutely do it differently. Yes, I definitely wanted to work on it on a taller table. I would have cut the wire off the spool in smaller sections. And I kept flipping the project over, seeing the front, seeing the back, seeing the front, seeing the back. I struggled a lot getting the wire around the petals of the peonies, or peonies, depending on how you say them. Every time I tried to add another stem in, I had to work around the petals again and again and again. So I was almost done with the first side before I finally figured out that I needed to move the flowers that go on the other side out of my project space so I had more space to work. I did not like the fact that every time I tried to add a new stem, it kept sliding and twirling. It's like I wanted to use tape or something. And like most projects, I very much got frustrated. The instructions say to go from the center out and to cross the stems on the center, which absolutely makes sense. But I would lay it all out in what order I wanted, and I'd almost want to start at like an edge and wrap the wire around that stem, and then add another stem on top of it and wrap the wire around. I wouldn't go from the center where you're having to work around the petals to add the new stem. So I absolutely want to do this project again and do it that way, instead of going from the middle out, working from the outside in. Because it wasn't just wrapping the wire around the petals that was frustrating, it was wrapping it around everything that was frustrating.
I don't know if you can see all the little bitty bits in here from these roses.
Still struggling with the wire, still struggling trying to get everything attached. I end up doing the second side a lot better, which you'll see in a moment here. I got a little knot in my wire, so then I had to cut it and unwind it, and this is when I realized, oh, maybe this would have been better all along, to cut small sections of the wire. It's so much easier to work with. As of the time of this recording, this exact floral hoop wreath kit is still available on the Adults and Crafts website, and I will link it below. There will also be a coordinating blog post with links to all of the supplies that I use for this project. So once I got the first half done, I did do a little adjusting to make sure I liked where everything was before I repeated that pattern on the other side. I also added smaller sections of wire to help secure the flowers onto the ring. I did go in and cut all the stems for the second half at one point. I thought that this made the whole process go a little bit faster. With wrapping the wire around and taking the whole spool around the hoop over and over again, a bunch of the wire started coming off. So I decided that cutting off smaller sections, about 18 inches, maybe 2 feet, probably wouldn't even need that much, was a lot easier. The other thing that I did different on the second half was that I wrapped the wire around each stem before attaching it to the hoop, so that the wire was secured on the stem before I started wrapping it around the hoop. I flipped it over so that I could see what I was doing. You can see what you're doing with the back side, but then you have to flip it back over to the front side to adjust and fluff. This is the point where I got frustrated, and in trying to wrap the wire around, the whole flower came off, and I decided I needed a break. I sent a little video to my mom of what I was working on and took a 10-minute break. And then I called her and talked to her. It made all the difference. Having someone to craft with makes the whole project more fun, in my opinion. I got to a point in the project where I was tired of wrapping the wire around each individual stem and then wrapping it around the hoop. So I decided I'm going to bundle a few of these stems together and then add them on. This made the project seem to go faster. I know how I want the project to look, but actually making it look that way is another story. And then, of course, the cat jumped on my project. Now that the cat is off my project again, the whole point of this project is to make it my own. I followed the directions to a point. I had a whole bunch of little stems that instead of putting them on individually, I wrapped them all together and put them all on at once. If you like this project and want to see more, make sure to hit the subscribe button. Here I was fluffing and tweaking the project after adding the last stems, and then I realized that I had put it on upside down and I needed to twirl it around to the front. And my wire got completely tangled because it all came off the end of the spool. The first side was a lot better because I quickly did the second half, because at this point I was getting tired of the project and my back was hurting because I was working on a low surface. So I had tied a bunch of stems together. I decided that I didn't like it. I didn't like it all bundled. So then I took apart at least the last bundle and so I could split it up. And then parts of my greenery kept falling off, so I had to keep putting them back on. And that's the beauty of this kind of a project, is that it's my own, and if I don't like it, I can take it apart and try something different. So the second time, instead of attaching 4 stems together, I only attached 2 stems at a time. Then of course the end of the wire got tangled up in part of my project. I had to untangle it. Oh, the joys of crafting. So once I finally got everything on there and spaced out the way I wanted it to, then it was time to fluff it and twist it and make sure everything was positioned where I wanted it before I added more wire. I decided that I needed to cut off a section of the wire that had fallen off and just put the rest of the spool away. If I had cut off sections of wire to begin with, I hopefully wouldn't have dealt with a bunch of the wire falling off the end of the spool. The next phase of the project is to add, and this is a completely optional step, is to add the floral tape around your wire. It adds extra security and it covers the wire so you don't see it. I have not worked with floral tape before, so I didn't really know how it sticks because it's not super sticky. It does stick to itself. My floral tape quickly became more of a wad of tape and was folding in on itself before I could get it wrapped around the hoop. Similar to the wire, I found that working with smaller sections of the floral tape made all the difference. I quickly got tired of the floral tape and wrapping it around there because it's a lot of work. I guess this is why this is an optional step. So I asked myself, what can you actually see? I wrapped what I mostly could see, and with where I had planned on putting it up on the wall, it didn't really matter. You wouldn't see much of it. I also, thinking about where I wanted it up on the wall, I knew that I wanted to add some kind of bow or something at the top because I didn't want the nail to be seen. I struggled with the center, trying to get the flowers to face the center, to face the front instead of facing to the side. It took a lot of bending of the stems. After I added as much floral tape as I wanted, I, of course, had to fluff and twist and adjust all the flowers again to get it to where I wanted it to be. When I finished the wreath, I hung it on the door to my craft room office space and decided I really kind of liked it. When I hung it on the wall and then added just like a simple bow made out of scrap ribbon, I didn't really like it in that space. It kind of seemed to blend in. So then I went back and hung it back on the door, which I enjoy much more. One of my favorite things about Adults in Crafts is they give you ample supplies for the project. So after my project is done, I still have a lot of floral wire and floral tape and of course the pruning shears. You can see how chewed up the blade of my pruning shears are from cutting all of the stems. If you like this project, make sure to give me a thumbs up and hit the subscribe button so you can see more when I get them done.